the set of documents known as the Northwoods documents or the Northwoods agreements or something to that effect. You featured them in your last book. Since we're talking a pretext for war, that certainly was a pretext for war in the early 60s. Can we speak about that for a moment?
The idea was to create a pretext to show that there was an attack by Cuba on the United States, and the idea was to have U.S. personnel from the CIA and other places secretly create terrorism in the United States. The documents actually said people would be shot on American streets, bombs would be blown up, and again, all this, the evidence would be laid to point the finger at Castro. One other idea was they were going to they had a very complex plan where they were going to take an aircraft and load it with CIA people who looked like college students, fly it over to have it take off from an airport in Miami with a lot of publicity, and then it would quickly, after it got into the air, land at a secret CIA base. At that same time, an identical plane would take off from that CIA base, except this plane would be empty. And it would be remotely piloted from the ground. It was a drone plane that would be very similar to the passenger plane that had just taken off. And once the plane was over Cuba, there was going to be a tape recorder that would have played a distress call into a microphone saying help we're being shot at. And a few minutes later, once the plane was over the Caribbean Sea, after it passed over Cuba, it would have somebody would have pressed a button on the ground, blowing up the plane, and they would have blamed Cuba for killing a plane load of American college students. At another point, they had this idea where they were going to actually John Glenn was going to go into his first space mission around that same time, and part of the plan was that if Glenn's rocket accidentally blew up on liftoff, they were going to plant evidence making it look like that it was Cuban sabotage that blew it up. These were all outrageous plans. They made their way all the way up to Secretary of Defense McNamara. Actually, the plans were all signed by all members of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and then they went up to McNamara, and McNamara rejected the plan, and that was the end of it. So it never got put into effect, but the fact that you can get all the members of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the senior military officials in the U.S. government, signing off on a plan that outrageous is extraordinary to me.
There's something happening here, but what it is ain't exactly clear. There's a man